Greetings, YouTube. Today I'm going to be reviewing the book Why Does the World Exist by Jim Holt. And Mr. Holt is using the definition of world to mean the universe, reality itself. Because I thought that was a little off-putting, frankly, the idea that you would use the word world. And I use the word world, I mean world. I mean this planet. So that's our world. But he means the entire fabric of reality itself. And I have to be honest. While an intriguing question from a sort of navel-gazing aspect, I've never considered this a particularly important question for myself. Now, how the universe came to exist, that's an interesting question. The Big Bang, quantum mechanics, the whole school of cosmological philosophy and things like that, that's awesome. The spiritual, our spiritual existence, how did that come into being? Awesome. The evolution of life, the abiogenesis, the actual early point in our past where life came out of non-life. Those are really interesting questions. But for me, why all this exists is less important. It doesn't really matter to me. It's here. Understanding what's here and understanding how we fit into the fabric of reality is far more important. Now, I don't want to shoot down philosophers that spend their time pondering this kind of thing, and it's interesting to see that there are people in the world that's what they do. They are professional philosophers, and that's a weird, weird thing. I have a friend that has a Master in Fine Arts in Poetry, and I asked her once, so what do you do at a Master in Fine Arts in Poetry? She said, oh, you teach other people to get their Masters of Fine Arts in Poetry. So I always kind of assumed that people with degrees in philosophy just like help create other people with degrees in philosophy. I've never seen a great deal of practicality to degrees in philosophy. Now, if the philosophy helps to inspire you to do something in addition to philosophy, to understand a particular point of sociology or psychology or spirituality, okay, I get it. But philosophy in its own right has been something, again, I kind of viewed as navel-gazing. And that isn't a particularly bad thing, but I have questioned in the past its utility. But sometimes you don't need a reason for existence. Sometimes art exists for art's sake, and sometimes philosophy exists for philosophy's sake. Now, I'm not going to spoil the ending of this book. It's not huge, and the trip between the beginning and the end is really fun and fascinating. He lends a wonderful sense of reality to the whole pursuit of this question, why does the world exist? He brings in the people that are involved. He lets you have a feeling of the past positions from all the way the early Greeks when we first had the first recordings of philosophy. We know there were probably philosophical schools prior to that, but without written language, we don't have any record of them. So some of those are the first traditional schools of thought in philosophy. From them all the way to the present. It's interesting that there's a school in Britain, whose name escapes me at the moment, whose purpose is just to have thinkers in it. There are no students. There are just faculty who think. That's all they do. They think and they write and they write and they think. And he spoke to one philosopher who's been there since he graduated from college with his degree. So for his entire academic life, he has done nothing but ponder reality. Modern day monks. And though I have no particular idea what that man's religious or spiritual beliefs are. Now, one of the things I did notice is that this was very much from a male perspective. This was very much from a privileged perspective. There's a lot of jet setting involved in this book. This guy goes all over the place, repeatedly, going back and forth from all different parts of the world in pursuit of this question. Most of the people he encounters in this philosophy, in fact, I don't know if he ever speaks to a female philosopher in this book. And from their names and where he's speaking to them, I get the feeling that almost all of them are Caucasian. So this seems to be a pursuit that is a whole lot of well-off white dudes, which is kind of depressing in many ways. But maybe it's emblematic of academia in general, as we understand it in the West. Maybe you have to be this. Maybe that there really are wonderful thinkers in less affluent classes, but because they're doing things to survive and they're not writing, we don't know about them. I've encountered some very wise people in my day that worked in factories and had manual jobs. They weren't writing books on philosophy. It didn't mean they weren't wise. But those words will be lost with me, because there's no one who's ever written them down, and I'm not going to speak for those people. But my memories of them are still there. And that's kind of sad. And it's also kind of sad that the things that we are going to have written down are going to give people the impression that philosophy is full of a whole lot of privileged white dudes. I'd like to see a change in that, but that's just me. I like a bit of diversity in the world. But the book is interesting. It's an enjoyable read. It's packed full of information. If you have an interest in history and philosophy, this is a book I do recommend you read. I think he has one other book. I'm saying here, I think he might have one other book. Yeah, stop me if you've heard this one, A History and Philosophy of Jokes. So I may look that one up and at some point in the future and give it a read. Though my reading queue is just unbelievably large. I have to work on that. I keep trying not to buy books, and occasionally I succeed, occasionally I fail. So I do recommend this if you are a fan of philosophy. And if you have read this, or you have read Mr. Holt's other book, I would like to hear what you have to say. So let's ponder some philosophy.